Okay, so let's now dive into this new ocean of search query performance. So first, tell
Yeah,
us people can find it and what's in it, and then we'll get into how we use it.
yeah, absolutely. So pretty straightforward to find. It's just, nestled within your Seller Central in your business reports. Um, and you do have to have like, brand ownership in order to be able to access it. So that's one important piece. If you're a seller, sells a lot of different things, but you don't have the ability to manage a storefront or manage a brand on Amazon, you're not going to have access to this tool. But if you do, which I would say is uh, probably the majority of most FBA businesses at this point. It's a really, really powerful tool, and one that I think can help you make sense of, like we said, in the previous episode, looking at these three metrics and watching them rise and fall and say, okay, something's happening with this. I need to go do the investigative work. Well, the search query performance report is one of those tools that you can turn to really understand, because Amazon is such a search-based shopping experience. It's not somewhere necessarily that people go like a Pinterest to just kind of like peruse and window shop. Granted, people are going to do that. It's really the mechanisms of Amazon are based around search. I think it's somewhere around like 80 or 90% of all their revenue is comes off of their search bar. So uh, when Amazon brought this search query performance report to light and gave access to it through Seller Central to all sellers, I think that was a big kind of like watershed moment for the FBA community in feeling like, okay, now I can really start to understand my business and my brand or my product relative to these search queries, knowing that that was kind of always the holy grail, and part of why so many different analysis tools like Helium 10, Jungle Scout, Cobalt, Data Hawk exist out there, is to try to help people make sense of all the queries, the search volume, the revenue by search term, and so forth on Amazon. So this search query performance report is super powerful, and provided to us by Amazon. So, straight from the source. And it's a really, really great tool.
Yeah. So so you have to be a brand registered seller for this,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And then as far as its location, you have to go to brands, and then as soon as you click brands, that first option, I believe the way they did it is a little bit weird, because when you land on it says brand analytics. So
Yep.
under brands, the sub menu shows brand analytics, and when you select that, that is in fact the search query performance, right? So they
Yep.
don't in fact say search query performance in the menu, but when you land on the page, it's titled search query performance. However,
Exactly.
in that on that page where it says search query performance, you have a sub navigation bar, and on that bar, if you click, you have different options, and one of them is catalog performance, and
Yep.
of course one of them is search query performance, and then there is one more, I forget what
It's
it is.
market basket analysis.
That's it, market basket analysis. So but this the first option, brand analytics, in the Seller Central menu puts you on search query performance, but on the search query performance navigation, this is in fact the second option. So
Yep.
if you want to go back to it, it's kind of weird. I don't know the logic that they followed. So it's just for our listeners. I just want to clarify, make sure you know how to navigate your way to search query performance. So on that search query performance page, you have brand view and you have ASIN view.
Yep.
So which one do you use?
I use both, honestly. I think the majority of like day to day, or at least for like competitive analysis, I'm typically looking at the brand performance. That helps give me kind of like a view of, okay, my brand, what are the top 1,000 queries for my brand on Amazon, and how do I stack up? And within that search query performance report for both ASIN and brand, they break it down into a search funnel. So it's like, kind of any marketing funnel. You start at the very top and you have impressions, and then you have clicks, and then you have add to carts, and then you have your purchase. That's like the holy grail of the funnel, right? That's the very bottom. When somebody becomes a purchase, then you try to put them back through it. So when you're on the search query performance report, you're going to see your impressions, and you're going to see for each query, so each search essentially, or search term, you're going to see the term, you're going to see your brand, the number of queries where your brand was, scored an impression, and then you also get a metric that shows you the total number of impressions for that query. So then you start to get to your metrics where you see your brand versus the entire number of impressions, so that you can see your impression share by brand. And then the same exact logic gets applies to each stage of the funnel, where you can see your click share by brand, you can see your add to cart share by brand, you can see your purchase rate. And as you look at each chunk of the funnel, you can kind of do your own independent analysis and say, okay, relative, for let's take the top 1,000 keywords, let's maybe filter out some that we feel are kind of garbage, and let's maybe just try to build a list of 100 and say these 100 are the ones that are most important to us. We're going to track them on a weekly. It's also worth noting that in the search query performance, you have weekly, monthly, and quarterly export. You can kind of aggregate the data in that report at the weekly, monthly, or quarterly level. So you can't pull this thing daily if you even wanted to. Well, you could pull it daily, but you would just be backdating a week from that day. So yeah, you can take each piece of the funnel and take a look at, okay, how does my brand for these, let's say, my 100 most important terms, how do we kind of like rank with our, brand percent on impressions? And then let's take a look at the click. Oh, wow, maybe we perform really, really well with impressions. So I would take that as like our SEO probably looks pretty good. Maybe our PPC campaigns are really high, like we're serving a lot of impressions. And it's also important to note in the search query performance that the impressions are inclusive of both organic and paid. So it's not just like the search query performance report is just the organic impressions or just the paid impressions, because you can already get a lot of that paid impression off of your advertising console. But what's nice with the search query performance report is it aggregates those two, so you can see, okay, all of the impressions that I'm getting on this term, what is that number, and how much am I relative to the competition? And yeah, really, really powerful. And then I would say, once you dig into the search query performance report and start to understand what share your brand has, and again, we're kind of just focusing right now on the brand specific piece of search query performance. You can start to use some of those great tools out there like Helium 10, DataHawk, or Jungle Scout to help you understand, okay, on this really important term, I might only be 20% of the impression volume or the click volume. I want to go out there and see who the competitors are who are likely taking up that other 80%. So you can start to look at share of voice on those terms and really start to, excuse me, quantify and understand truly who the competitor is on those most important terms, and track over time your ability to improve or improve your share of voice or your impression share. But there's a lot of different things that you can do with the search query performance report. And one of the other things I really like is it's tough and it takes a lot of time. So I think a lot of people probably don't get into the weeds quite this much, but you can also start to understand with the search query performance report how much of your organic sales you're cannibalizing with your paid your PPC, so your like paid media on Amazon, where if you reduce your marketing on a search term, but you see your sales stay the same, that's probably a good indicator, or your add to cart stay the same, your impressions stay the same. It's a good indicator that you're probably paying for a top 5 placement that you're getting anyway. So you might be actually like spending money to have that like top of search placement from a sponsored ad that maybe you don't necessarily need to pay quite as much because you're looking at that search term within the search query performance report. Your product or your brand is already surfacing very, very highly for that. So you're kind of like double dipping, which can be good when you look at share of voice and you're like, hey, I search men's, let's say men's sandals, and my product is featured 20 or 30 times across that page. Then you essentially have ownership of that. That's
Yeah.
kind of the holy
So
grail on Amazon, is to completely own a search term.
yeah. So what you are referring to is somebody searches a particular term and listings come up. Of course, right at the top, you have the sponsored products. And then somewhere close to the top, the organic listings start to show. And the scenario you're referring to is your own sponsored product listing appears at the top, and then also right underneath, your organic appears because you have good ranking. And that's where you are thinking, what's the point, right? Because you are already ranking well. Why do you want to bid on those? That's what you are getting at, right?